Today on Pivot with Griselda, I'm thrilled to welcome Elizabeth Vega OBE, a prominent tech entrepreneur and digital transformation pioneer who founded Informed Solutions back in 1992. So Elizabeth's career spans more than 30 years at the forefront of digital transformation, enterprise growth, and purposeful leadership. And she has advised global brands, shaped public policy, and led bold change, all while staying true to her values of diversity, inclusion, sustainability, and social equity. So for me, Elizabeth is a leader who really inspires me. And what makes her pivot story so inspiring for me, and I hope for you as well, is her resilience, her integrity, her humility, and ability to consistently bet on herself and to win against all odds. So I'm delighted to welcome Elizabeth to the show. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming. You're welcome.
Griselda, thank you very much for inviting me. I mean, everything that you've done across our community and encouraging others, I think is genuinely inspirational. And I'm delighted to be part of that community and delighted to be able to share some of our experiences so that perhaps we can encourage other women to do the entrepreneurial and the leadership journey. I think that's really important for our future. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for being open to sharing your journey as well, Elizabeth. So let's start with who you were before it all started. Your career was spent moving around the world from Uruguay to Australia to Canada and Spain. How did that shape who you've become, the kind of leader you are now?
Well, my father, obviously my father's work required us to move around and to land in very different as children, to land in very different settings. I think the first thing that it taught me is to stop and really listen and understand, particularly as a child. You know, you can be quite vulnerable and you're only really learning to develop your own personality and your own coping strategies. So I think, you know, with the support of my family, I did. I stopped and I listened and I watched and I understood. And that helped me connect with people. That also gave me a better sense of myself, because when you move from different settings, whether that's different countries or schools or jobs or roles, I think what you take with you is you. And if you're able to use that as a learning opportunity to find who you are at your core and what you bring into these different settings, I think that is very helpful.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that as well, because I grew up in Ghana. And when you've been in a different culture, it's difficult not to empathize with anybody at all who's had a different experience to what you're having. I was also wondering about the business you built. You know, it's a huge business. It's had a lot of impact both in government and the private sector as well as the public sector. And I know you give your time to a lot of fantastic causes, as well as, you know, sitting on some boards and being an advisor in some senior positions. To anyone listening to us, joining us for the very first time, how would you explain what you do?
I have a very particular way of thinking, and I am able to visualize things that are in common. So in particular, things that intersect. So, for example, the digitization agenda or the IT adoption agenda, how businesses change, the people side that I can see in my mind's eye where things come together, where they intersect. And so I try to develop a narrative and to work across groups that bring these things together, because transformational change is not really successful when it's siloed. You need to bring together different facets of technology, of data, of skills, of people, and also having a purpose of, you know, sort of an overarching purpose that actually helps you shape the right blueprint for things. And I think that's what really motivates me, looking for things that can help join up and deliver that impact that elusive impact that we're all looking for, but driven by purpose, because I think people are more likely to join you on a journey when they actually know what direction you're all going in.
Yes, fantastic. So you talk about, you know, thinking and seeing things differently. And I know there's so much talk now of neurodiversity and people being able to process information differently, and that even being called a superpower. And I know the young people are now being told to pursue their passion and to pursue what they love to do. But actually, your father gave you advice about your superpower, using that rather than chasing what you love, which is quite different from what people are told nowadays. Can you please just share a bit about that advice and how you've used that in your growth?
Absolutely. I mean, this is my own experience, and I'm sure it doesn't apply to everyone, but I think that my father certainly didn't say to me, you can be anything you want, you can do anything you want and still be successful in your career. I think we do that out of kindness and we do that out of potentially misplaced loyalty to our child. But I think the advice my dad gave me, my father was an engineer, so he was pretty straight talking, is, actually know yourself, understand what your strengths are and build a career around that. And, within that line of discipline, within that career, then look for opportunities that speak to your heart. And I think that was really good advice, because people that try, misguidedly perhaps to do the things that are in their passion, but they're not good at, they have to work so much harder than someone that has a natural talent in that area. And I think sports is a good parallel, Griselda. You may very well want to be a Premier League footballer, and that can be a wonderful aspiration. But if you've got two left feet and no sense of balance and, it's not a constructive way to give your child guidance that you can be. If, however, they're playing to their natural talent, absolutely lean in and encourage and be the cheerleader for your child. That's my background anyway, and it served me pretty well.
I mean, I actually shared this with my son because he's hearing a lot on social media about, doing what you love, doing what you love. And I said, actually, no, I'm interviewing Elizabeth and this is what she said. And this is what's led her to be the success that she is. And I think it took some time for him to be able to process the information and to understand that actually, he wants to be a sports person because everybody is a sports person, but wanting to do sports and having injury all the time or not having the build to be able to do it does not mean you can't go on to be successful in some other area of sports and to rather lean into your talent. Even that advice there is such a gem for a lot of people to just focus on what they're great at already, rather than trying to follow a passion that isn't really going to lead them to the success that they're looking for.
I would say this, but I think you've given your son great guidance, because really, if sport is his passion, I'm making it up to illustrate the point, not to be specific about the example. He can still do a career in IT and intersect that with sport, or perhaps legal. There are so many places which intersect, and I encourage people that are following traditional career paths, whether that's law or medicine or any of those things, to also embrace technology, because that's where the jobs of the future are, and those are the ones that will give you a well-paid jobs, create so many opportunities, and you can always be a philanthropist if you're really successful. So they're not mutually exclusive, but you've got to start on a confident footing that plays to your strength and your ability to build a career that pays well for you.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much for that. And so there's another thing I've heard you say a few times as well, that you see the world differently. And I'm just curious to know, when did you realize that you were seeing or processing things differently? When did that realization come to you?
I think there were possibly, obviously it's a gradual realization. These things are not just a bolt of lightning. Yes. But when we moved from Australia to Canada, as a child, I was about 10 or 11. As a child, I found it shocking that we could speak the same language. And I knew that Canadians had a different accent to Australians, even though we spoke English. I found the cultural things really fascinating. Australians are pretty straight talking, and Canadians are more like British people. There's a gentleness to the comms. They're very, very kind people. Aussies we're very kind, I think, but possibly a little bit more blunt. And as a 10-year-old, I just found that quite fascinating, that people just thought I was being rude, and I've never wanted to be rude. It's just the directness of communications. And also I was confronted with some children being very kind and welcoming and being fascinated by an Australian accent in Vancouver, and other children were quite cruel. I had to basically learn to navigate that. So I think that's the cultural side of, the things that join us up, like language, can also be misleading as regards the different experiences because of communications, because of how people maintain relationships. The other thing that I think was another defining moment for me was the way I learn. And I think that's something that we've really brought into Informed Solutions, the learning pathways. And that is, people learn in different ways. I don't remember very well by memory. I remember by building a mind map. I connect things. I need to understand and make sense of them and connect them in terms of relevance. And then I really get it. And I'm able to extrapolate all sorts of different ideas and models and things like that. When I have been taught in a way that's just memorized things, I'll be honest with you, I struggled a bit. So I've brought that into the workplace, because I recognize that people learn in different ways. And I think those are the two things that resonated with me in terms of realizing I was possibly different.
Fantastic. So, Elizabeth, you also talk about starting Informed Solutions, but then before that, you had a whole different career, didn't you? And I'm quite interested in that transition, that pivot you made. What led to that? You deciding to start your own business in 1992 when there weren't a lot of women trying to start tech businesses.
Well, I'm the product of big corporations. So my first employer was Unilever. So I was on the management graduate training course with Unilever in Australia. And I really enjoyed that, but I was, I think, the only woman working in the IT department. And I realized that culturally, and this was quite a few years ago now, culturally, it was really difficult. And, it, to some degree, it didn't matter how hard you worked and how much you contributed. There was still going to be a difference with male colleagues. And as I said, this was 40 odd years ago now, so you can imagine. And then, of course, I worked through a number of corporates, which, I'm very grateful for the opportunities they created for me. And I did well because I figured out, again, I stopped, I listened, I learned, I figured out how the systems in these organizations worked. I was never combative. I'm not somebody that looks to make enemies. I don't believe I need to fight every battle. A little bit like water, I just learned to navigate around things and make the best of every opportunity. And then I came to the realization that I loved my job, but I wanted to create a different type of workplace culture. And that is difficult to do in big corporations. And so I exited and I started Informed Solutions. And my first client was my ex-employer. So I think that's an example of how not to burn your bridges just because you want to cross that bridge. Do it with dignity, with respect, where you can always bump into your ex-colleagues and your ex-employer and feel quite comfortable with the fact that you've made a decision that is the next stage of your life, but you don't need to leave, on combative terms. And it was really good because I had a 3-year contract as a startup, and that really set me on a good journey for setting up my own business.
Wow. Elizabeth, one of the things I love about you is your grace and your calm. And I love the analogy of being like water, just, finding your own way through harsh terrain, so to speak. I find that these days, when you look online, the narrative is very combative. And a lot of women feel, to make a stance, they have to be very combative to be heard. And you don't do that, yet you're very effective at leading in your own business as well as in some quite senior public sector spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you have to say? What can people learn from how you do that? Because you do it in a very beautiful yet effective way. And I'm just in awe of how you do it.
Well, Griselda, you're so generous. Thank you very, very much for that. I think it's my philosophy, and it's not meant to be dismissive. I try to make friends wherever I go. And with some people, you will have developed deep friendships because you share certain values and certain beliefs. And with other people, they will just be good acquaintances. People where, when you get together, you have a constructive, a positive time. And I think it's that realization, that grown up conversation that not everyone's going to be in your inner circle. As to how I've built my career, I try not to be combative, but I definitely look to express my views in a respectful way. I think the lever is actually building a body of experience, really being competent and prepared and capable of what you do so that your skills and your experience are valuable. And once your experience and your skills are valuable, if you're not welcome at that table, that's cool because you've got so many other opportunities. Okay?
So you give yourself, you create enough opportunity so you're not beholding and having to compromise your values in any one situation. Yeah.
Yeah. You can, and I mean, there have been times where I've applied for positions where I've looked at the job description and I thought I could really make a positive contribution. I feel I could really be of value in situation. But others have said, you're not for us. And the truth is, I never take exception because if they don't think I'm the right person, then I'm not the right person. Because to be effective as a leader or an expert, people need to be prepared to listen to you. They need to prepare open-minded enough to take your contribution and your input and give it credibility and act on it. And if they're not inclined to that, then actually you don't need to be at that table. And if you have built up a body of experience and skills, then there are so many other tables where you can sit down. Okay.
That
And
is so different from the advice that people give. And this is a beauty of someone like you. It's not just about listening to what everybody else is doing, but actually doing what works and having the evidence in the body of work to show that it actually works. So you're saying don't force yourself into rooms where you're not welcome, because there's no
absolutely.
point in doing that.
No, in my view, there isn't any point. I mean, if at the entertain someone disrespects you, I think you do as a woman need to find I have certain standard language that I use. If somebody is disrespectful, I use a variation of, why do you think it's okay to say that to me? And then I just allow the silence to set in. I don't find that being combative actually helps you come across as more, more credible or more assertive. I think women in particular, and I say this from experience, I'm not telling anybody what to do. I think sometimes we can be triggered into playing to stereotypes. We can be really well prepared, but people will perhaps intentionally or unintentionally provoke us. And then we rise to that. We are combative. And then we're playing into see how this woman is irrational. See how this woman, she can't accept disagreement. Don't play into that. I'm a practicing stoic. Don't allow others to provoke you. Don't allow yourself to be triggered. Just keep your peace. And if you're not able to contribute or feel valued in that forum, just graciously step away and look for much better opportunities, because you have the skills to offer in other places.
I love that you've mentioned Stoicism, because that's something I've started recently and reading into the philosophy books. Is there any particular approach you follow? Is there any particular school of thought?
Well, there are some guiding principles in Stoicism, and I think we will see them recognized in other areas. So one of them is recognize the things that are in your gift that you can change, and then be a positive agent of change, and recognize those things that you can't change and make peace with it. Because, in life, I think it's important to play your best. We're all dealt a certain set of cards. And for me, the success in life is to know how to play the strongest possible hand, depending on what cards you're dealt. I think a lot of the anxiety that young people feel is because they're always anticipating things that are possibly nothing they can do about it, and they ruminate about it, and they become obsessive about it. You need to make peace with that. You need to, in your pond, you can't boil the ocean, but in your pond, be the most positive agent of change that you can be. And the magic thing happens that you surround yourself with people that feel like you do. You find your tribe. You find the support you need, and together you can get so many more things done. Whereas if you take a combative stance, actually, even people that might be supporters, perhaps off-put by that very negative intensity. And so those are some of the things that I think in Stoicism. The other one is just be able to moderate, manage your emotions. It's not that you don't feel. I feel quite deeply. I'm quite an empathetic person, but I've learned to master my emotions, not to allow myself to get too triggered. And so therefore, other people can't manipulate me as much. Other people can't provoke me. And also the silence. I think silence is a very powerful tool. Silence is not nothing. Silence is actually sometimes more powerful than words. And we need to learn to use that wisely and judiciously. So those are some of the examples.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. This has been a masterclass, because you've touched on so many things that I could go back and just, ask more on. Actually, the advice you're giving is so sound, yet uncommon these days. You're telling people to conserve energy, to focus on what they can change, to build allies, and to be in rooms where they've got support in those rooms. Whereas now, it's all about vulnerability. Emotions are not being controlled in the same way. People think being not regulating your emotions is being vulnerable, and that is a strength. But that doesn't always work, because you need to know the spaces you can do that in. And not every space for us women is the right space to show all your emotions. I really love that you're saying that, because that's not advice that is very common these days. People are just jumping on bandwagons and doing things without really understanding the science or the philosophy behind them.
I think it depends on where people get their validation. I do a masterclass informed on confidence, and you have the concept of building intrinsic confidence as opposed to seeking validation externally. this is my personal view, so please, I hope no one crucifies me. I think the language of victimhood is because you're always seeking external validation. Confidence comes from resilience. Confidence, in my view, comes from knowing yourself, what is acceptable to you, what you want, not being combative with others who want something different. That's cool. If somebody wants something different, you do you, I will do me. And ideally, we find enough common ground to work together. That would be awesome because we will be able to do so much together. But, the narrative of victimhood is actually very disempowering because it creates an over-reliance on external validation. Whereas, building your internal resilience where you can work through challenges, that's a sense of achievement, the sense of being outside of your comfort zone, stretching yourself, being the best you can be. And that gives you intrinsic confidence. And I think that's much more empowering than somebody else saying, yes, aren't you a victim, poor little you. We can't always live in our feelings.
Fabulous. So you are somebody who is very resilient. You face a lot of challenges. I think so far we've talked about all the amazing things you do and your fabulous qualities and principles. And somebody might be sitting there thinking, well, she's had it easy, but you haven't. You faced a lot of challenges. And I think when I was doing the research, I came across some of the challenges you faced. And I know just like last year, I faced some challenges with people treating me very badly, suppliers treating me very badly, and that knocked me for six. But I know that you had situations with the business where you had two major suppliers, two major clients refuse to pay, and you had to go through all of that. Can you share how you managed that whole challenge, how you overcame it, how you were able to move forward? Because I find that sometimes when you go through these challenges, you beat yourself up because you think you should have known better, you should have planned better, you should have done better. You could have avoided it if you had run your business differently. So can you talk us through how you went through all of that and came out the other end stronger and more resilient?
Well, I'm very sorry, Griselda, that you had such a hard year last year. And I have a saying that when the economy gets strange, people's behavior can get very strange. People can be very misguided. And I think it's the scarcity mindset. It's that bunker mindset where I just take care of myself because, I'm under pressure. And I always feel very sorry when that is projected onto other people. I think everyone struggles. I think the human condition is struggle. I think we're born to learn. I think we're born to work through problems and to be resilient and to find peace and to find happiness where we can. And that means different things to different people, whether that's raising a family, growing a business, working in a challenging job in a corporation, working in communities which actually need support. So all of us have a struggle. And I think we need to respect that and give each other grace. My own experience is that, yes, entrepreneurship, particularly leadership in entrepreneurship, is incredibly satisfying, but every day of the week presents its problems. Whether it's the economy, whether it's government policy, whether it's supportive of small businesses or whether it's not, whether your own staff, particularly if you hire a lot of young people, which may not necessarily be work ready and have realistic expectations about what a workplace is about, whether it's your clients that are under incredible pressure and just need a job done, and they may not always have the budget that they need, and you have to work with each other and keep talking. So in my situation during the global financial crisis of 2008 to 2010, regrettably, I'd had two clients who basically just breached contract. And we found ourselves in a very difficult situation because any business relies on having a pipeline of revenue, particularly where it's contractual. And one of the challenges I found that SMEs really have a problem with access to justice because pursuing breaches of contracts is very, very expensive, time consuming. And it can be very fraught, and there's not always a guarantee of success because the law isn't always about justice. Sometimes it's about a technicality and being able to evidence losses and things like that, which I didn't know about before. And so I had to work through that, and it came to the decision as to whether the company could keep going because we didn't have expected revenues. And it came to a cross in the road where to keep the company going, I needed to sell my home because you couldn't get borrowings. During the global financial crisis, of course, the banks were trying to strengthen their balance sheets and they weren't lending, particularly to a company who had experienced two breaches of contract. So I sold my home. My team and I sat down. We talked about it in all honesty. And it's just like, do I believe in what I'm doing? Is it a blimp or is it something more fundamental? And I did it and I never regret it. It was arguably the biggest personal decision I'd made, but I never regret that, Griselda.
Wow. I mean, a lot of people will hear you saying that and think, wow, who gives up their home to pay their employees? People do the opposite. They take money out of a distressed business so that they can keep it if things went south. But you do exactly the opposite. And I know when I read the article as well, you talked about discussing, you've mentioned that you discussed it with your team, you consulted with your family as well. And I just love, anytime I found articles online with your father being mentioned, he just sounds like a very wonderful person in the advice that he gives. So your parents didn't agree on what you should do, but you went ahead anyway and did that. And so can you just talk me through that as well, what that felt like, not having everybody on board supporting the decision?
Well, I mean, everybody has a different risk appetite, and your parents always want the best for you. And I think you need to accept that as, and accept whatever feedback they give you through that lens, that they want the best for you, but that's within their experience. My father was an engineer, and I didn't know this, but my father was a stoic. I didn't have a name for it at the time, but he was a very clear thinking person. And also, like my father, I'm able to separate out my emotions from the logical side, though I do reconnect them. My mother was much more conservative, and she wanted me to be okay. She wanted me to not lose my home. She wanted me to be safe, and she wanted me to come back to Australia. It's like, hey, you could get a job anyway. Just come back home with your family. And I had to really think about it. I'd listen to everyone. And then I believe in not making decisions based on fog. So fog stands for fear, obligation, and guilt. And so those are the emotions that can sometimes overly influence your decision. You make a decision based on fear, anxiety. You make a decision based on an obligation. And sometimes obligation, you're manipulated into feeling a certain obligation. And the other one, of course, is guilt. You can make you can make a decision based on a misguided sense of guilt. And so I try to separate that up from the facts. For me, I had an amazing team of people. We had done and were building a fabulous business. I knew that this was the job I wanted to do and the people I wanted to work with. And it was simply circumstances. And the truth is, those circumstances can arise at any time. You can be made redundant from a corporate job. You can have problems because of your health or because of your dependency. These things just happen in life. And so you need to really make a more sustainable decision. And the sustainable decision is, I believe in my colleagues. I believe in the business. I believe in where we're going. And this is just a sacrifice, a compromise I need to make to keep going. And that's how I made the decision, Griselda.
Wow. I'm learning so much. I've never heard the fog used before. It's fantastic. And I think I'm going to be using that as well going forward. You've talked about, having to sell your house, which is a big, big bet. Are there other bets similar to that skill that you've made as you've been growing the business to where you are now?
I think entrepreneurship isn't just one lane. Some of the key decisions we've made is whether we take external investment. The private equity, venture capitalist, angel side of the market can help you grow your business quite quickly, but then you'll be holding to external investors. And so we needed to make a decision as to whether we self-financed and we right-sized the business for each stage of the growth and the sort of finance we could attract at that time. And that has served us pretty well. Other organizations, the choice is they have a product which is ready to market and they can accelerate that growth with external investment. So those are pretty strategic decisions you need to think about. Some operating models scale quickly, other operating models, including ours, which is services and innovation based, it's better to take a little bit of time. The other thing is recruitment of experienced colleagues, experienced staff. I have 3 criteria that we hire people on. The first one is cultural integration. Are they going to be an awesome colleague? Are we going to trust each other? Are we really going to be able to work well together and find pleasure and a sense of satisfaction and enjoyment out of working? Or are we going to find that a tense relationship, which can be very political? And I remember from big corporate life, sometimes the politics were quite demoralizing. The second one is operational integration, particularly where you're hiring people that are very experienced. Some people want to come in and do things their way, and we need to have a conversation to say, hey, we really value your skills, your experience, your new ideas, but we don't want you to turn us into the company you used to work for. We're a different organization. So we want you to improve how we work, but please be respectful of what we do operationally. And the third one is the capability integration. Again, adding that the skills and experience of our new colleague and strengthening our board and our executive leadership. And we've done that really, really well. We have 2 boards. We have a business board and then we have a technical board. and our colleagues are fantastic. But that's a very important decision, recruitment of senior staff, because a lot of people just hire for skills and experience, but attached to every set of skills and experience comes a free human being. And that human being is going to be an awesome colleague, or it's going to be a relationship which can be a little bit fraught. So that's another thing that we do quite differently, perhaps to other organizations.
Yeah. But Elizabeth, you're in quite a competitive market. I have a background in professional services firm. I know how challenging it is, both from the business development side as well as the recruitment side. And so for you to be winning the scale of business that you're winning, that shows a machine or an engine that's very effective. And I'd really love to know more. I'm curious about your business development. How are you winning such scale of work to be able to keep this engine and the headcount of people you have, occupied and utilized?
It goes back to imagining what your business is about. So for us, we have focused on building mastery and competence in what we do, and we evidence that through our accreditations. We have got very serious accreditations around our professional capabilities, and we have invested in a learning and development platform to make sure that we have a pipeline of the future experts and the future leaders that will help us grow the business. Number two, we build trust. We have a real culture of trust, not just amongst ourselves, but with our clients. And trust isn't just the narrative of trust, it's the behaviors of trust. You have to behave in trustworthy ways, and then people believe you. And to give them an opportunity within reasonableness to get to know you a little bit. So we try not to do transactional business. Occasionally the relationship starts as transactional business. A client needs a job done and then we're able to do that job. But hopefully we can mutually invest in getting to know each other. And then, the relationship evolves and we're able to have great case studies, really. And the third one is just being good people to work with. We work a lot in blended teams where not only do we build the solutions the client needs, but we help out our client staff actually learn along that journey. We do a lot of skills transfer and we have blended teams. And so we're collegiate in our behaviors as well. And that doesn't undermine contract at all, because of course we all know we're grown-ups. We have an obligation contractually. But those three things I think are really key to why Informed has grown. And it's grown sustainably, maybe not as fast as some organizations think we should have grown, but we're really happy with it. We've been profitable for 31 out of 33 years. Year one was not profitable, and year 2009, the global financial crisis, was not profitable. So the rest of the time, it just shows you that behaving in the right way can still make you financially and professionally very successful.
I just want to shout that loud so that all other leaders can hear that. Because the excuse is always that you can't do both. You have to compromise people. You have to compromise values. You have to compromise, the great things about being in leadership so you can make more money. But you're showing that you don't have to do that. And we just need more leaders like you showing others the way, because I think, quite frankly, some people think it's impossible to be successful, to be profitable, and to be purposeful. And you found the balance, and it's working for you and your team. And I know everybody I've spoken to on your team loves working for you. They just love the company you built as well. And that's testament to your leadership and the culture, you talking and walking what you've been telling us all, and not just, virtue signaling like some leaders are prone to do these days.
Well, it goes back to that. Thank you for saying that. And I'll make sure that my team get a good bonus at the end of the year for having given me the vote of faith. No, I mean, I'm thrilled because we're one of the top 1% of employers globally and great places to work. We alternate between 93 and 96%. So that places us in the 1% of companies globally as a great place to work. But we've worked very, very hard on that. And we are really clear with our people about the expected behaviors, because culture is defined by how people behave towards each other. Culture is not defined by the office you're in. It's not defined by the furniture, etc. It's defined by how people behave towards each other. And if leaders do not tolerate poor behaviors, then that really does influence the relationships, both with clients and also with each other. But no, I don't believe that you need to be unethical and you need to have sharp practice just to be profitable. You need to be true to yourself and you need to be clear in your communications, what you stand for. And it goes back to Griselda, you find your tribe. You really do find your tribe.
And so, Elizabeth, why is this such a personal mission for you? Because you could say, I've grown the business, I can exit now, I can go off and sit in the sun in Australia. You've earned it. You could do that. But you're still very much driven after 30 years of leading, of growing, of scaling, and giving your time to all these different courses. What's driving you? What's your personal mission with this?
I just loop back temporarily for, I believe in really being the best I can be, and I take pride in that. I work hard at it. Some things do not come easily to me, but I'm trying to be thoughtful and intentional about it.
I want to know one thing that doesn't come easily to you, because since I've met you, everything comes easily to you.
No, I'm not patient. I'm not a patient person. I have to have learned to, and people like me can be quite intense. I think quickly. I'm a can-do person. I'm an energizer. I'm a driver. I'm a can-do person, problem solver. And so you have to learn to give others grace. You have to really try to respond to differences of opinion rather than perhaps because you're time driven or you're deadline driven to be dismissive because you're inclined to think it doesn't work. So I know there are things definitely, Griselda, that personality types like mine need to temper ourselves. But going back to this, how to engineer success across the business is genuinely to be inclusive. I set out really to make the company very, very egalitarian. There is certain language that starts off meaning one thing and then gets evolved and hijacked into meaning something different. We've just been very, very egalitarian and a level playing field. And the amazing things happens. We've got the United Nations working for informed solutions because we look at the people attached to the skills. We develop everybody. We share values. We're respectful of different opinions and different beliefs. And it's also a very great workplace for women. That the astounding thing that we had with the last intake of graduates and placement students for the first intake, which was in July, is they're all girls. They're all girls, eight girls. And I was really shocked. And I rang back just to make sure that we weren't positively discriminating, because goes back to, if your really firmly held belief is fair means fair to everybody, I just want checking in that we weren't just picking the girls. And they said no. And a really interesting thing developed. A lot of the boys, a lot of the guys that applied to us, they want to work remotely, full remote working. And we said, no, we're a people business. We use technology, but we're a people business. We need to be colleagues. We need you in the office, hybrid working. All of the girls leaned into that. All of the girls used some of what are traditionally female attributes of, no, I want to be part of a team. I want to learn from others. I want to, be part of those conversations. And so for the first intake of our placements and graduate students, they're all girls. The second intake, which will be in October, I think, is a little bit more mixed with boys and the girls. But I found that fascinating, that female attributes are actually starting to be far more effective in the workplace, because so much of the remote working plays to the I can work at home full time and I don't need my colleagues around me, which of course we all know that's not the case. But that's again social media and how it's influencing our young people.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well done. Well done. Because again, companies are saying women are not interested in working for them, and we know that is not true. However, there's an opposing narrative at the moment that the young boys are getting left behind because there's so much focus on women and women's initiatives and getting women into leadership, and that the young boys do not have positive role models or have the same supports when they land in the workplace. And I know your approach has been to support everybody else. So what do you have to say to that?
I think, again, that's divisive. That's a divisive narrative. This is my personal belief, okay, and not everybody. I think that the problem with boys is that it's perhaps the traditional things that were valued, which is just the technical skills and the male role models, are now being a little bit more challenged. We have got a lot of male leaders in the company. So it's not a case of you can't be what you can't see, because at Informed Solutions, we have got women all the way up the company and all the way across. And the boys are there as much as the girls. Okay. I think it's because young men are buying into this narrative of I can work fully remote. It's only about the value of my technical skills. And they haven't yet leaned into the jobs of the future will be about your human skills, your cognitive skills, your team working skills. And the girls really get that. The boys are still a little bit resistant to that. This is my experience, okay? And so it's interesting that now for the jobs of the future and the apprenticeships and internships, the girls are really keen to come into the office and be part of the teams. The boys have still got that very scientific, I can do my job remotely if you just tell me exactly how to do it. That's just what do I call it? Anecdotal observations. I don't have a, double blind research paper or anything on it, just anecdotal observation
It's
from
your
having.
experience as a leader. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And you're allowed to say that. Not everything has to be so politically correct now. I think everyone is so afraid to say anything in case they say the wrong thing and people jump on them for having an opinion that is a bit different from what everyone agrees on in the mainstream. I think that we could do more to support everyone. And I love what you said earlier on about the narrative being to just create discourse, because it's we always make everything a zero-sum game. If women are winning, then men must be losing. If black people are getting on, then white people must be losing. And it's not really, in my opinion, it shouldn't be that way. If one group is getting ahead, let's look at why other people are getting behind and support them as well. But we don't need to always switch gears from one or the other, because ultimately we just undo all the work that's been done without actually making society better for everyone, which is what we should be aiming for anyway. If we're going to get things to work, we're going to get society to be safer, more sustainable, work more inclusive, and everybody to be wealthier, which is why I love the mission you have for Informed Solution, because you cover health, you cover wealth, you cover safety, the environment, you cover everything. And you don't normally hear technology businesses talking in that way. They tend to be very focused on using the technology to solve a technological problem. But you have a very holistic view of that. And also have a view on sustainability as well, which again, I think is quite rare for the industry you're in. What is driving that focus on sustainability as well?
I think if you want to make an enduring change, if you want to leave a positive legacy, it's not just about that particular transaction. I'm very conscious that it's taken 30 odd years to build the sort of, reputation. I don't personally love the word brand. That's just my own personal thing. I like identity. What is the company known for? How do you identify Informed Solutions? What's our reputation? What do people say about you when you're not in the room? And so I think if you think that way, sustainability and leaving a positive legacy and making a positive change becomes part of your DNA. And if you build that into the business, then again, you will find other people that feel the same. I did a keynote speech at Oxford for the life sciences, and one of my opening comments was like, isn't it awesome to work in an industry that helps people live better and age better? Like, what a privilege to work in life sciences and to be able to use our expertise, our knowledge, technology, data to actually have that purpose-driven mindset. And you had a room full of people that, were representing drug companies, medical devices, digital and data, and all of us could work together to literally have a purpose which help people live a better life and to age, more healthily. And that's just the way I think. I can't say anything more than that.
You've said it all. And I'm just curious, one more question about the board advisory roles you have. I know you've advised the Prime Minister, you're an export ambassador. Those roles sound pretty impressive. And I imagine a bit of a time commitment for you to do well as well. I know you support the Open University as well, which is how we met. And there are so many wonderful things that you do. And I also know you'll probably be the only woman in the room most of the time when you're doing these things. So how are you leveraging, how are you being influential in those spaces when you're a lone voice in the room?
Well, interestingly enough, there are times where I've been invited to apply for board positions or advisory positions, and I have been the only voice in the room. And so I will ask very pleasantly, I will ask uncomfortable questions as to why, what do they feel my contribution will be? How do they feel that I can help them succeed? And sometimes those answers do not sit comfortably with me. But in general, Griselda, the truth is the positions I do take, I am not the only person in the room, the only woman in the room. Sorry. And that is actually reassuring to me, because it goes back to find a table where you are welcome. Find a table where your contribution they will allow you to make a difference. Learn to find your voice in a respectful way, in a constructive way, where you're not disrespecting different opinions, and hopefully they won't uninvite you from the next meeting. Sometimes it can get spicy. And so you actually weave your way, you navigate your way through life to find those places of influence. And once you build a body of experience and credibility, then the other invitations will follow. The days where you needed to fight your way onto a board where you were the only woman, you were the token gesture, I honestly feel those days we need to move on from them. And I enjoy what I do. That's the other thing. I really genuinely, really enjoy the people I'm working with. And so there's a sense of fun as well as a sense of seriousness in the things that we're trying to achieve together.
Yeah, I get that sense as well. And I'm always curious how you keep yourself so energized and inspired. Having done this for quite a while, I've only been running my business for about 10 years. And I just think sometimes, oh my God, this is hard work. But I can't imagine myself in 30 years. I think I'll probably have retired by now and been on a beach somewhere. So, Elizabeth, we met because you won the Novi Businesswoman of the Year this last year. You beat everybody down, hands down. The judges thought you were phenomenal. I thought you were phenomenal. Everyone in the room can't wait to hear you speak at the awards we're having this year. And I just wanted you to just share what it means to win an award like ours. I know you've gone on since and won many, many more, but for an organization like ours and the mission we have to help more women break barriers, what does it mean for you to have won our awards?
Well, I think the work that you're doing, Griselda, and the Novi community is really impressive because it actually seeks out to support each other, to identify each other, find those women that are making a difference, help others understand how those people navigated through their careers, through the challenges and experience of, some sectors are welcoming of women, other sectors are just not accustomed to working with women. Some sectors are quite resistant to women. There's everything in between. And so we can learn from each other. And also, I think, like you were saying, particularly as a leader and as an entrepreneur, you have your nose down and your tail up. You work very hard. And sometimes you don't even know whether people notice. I don't know if that's your experience. You're just
Yes,
so
I can relate
focused.
to that.
You're focused on getting really prepared for a meeting so you can make a powerful contribution. You're so focused on participating in that meeting in a constructive, respectful way, but still making your points come across. You're so accustomed to focusing on making sure your people are supported, your clients are happy, your bank is comfortable with you, all of these sorts of things. And you don't even think to look up and say, does anybody even notice what I do? So I think the wonderful thing about the Novi Awards is like, oh my gosh, I am making a difference, and maybe it is an observable thing. But also it's the ability to give back to other women that perhaps are still trying to make sense of it and work it out and find their own path in life. And for me, that was such an honor to be recognized in that way. And as you know, I wasn't expecting. It's like, oh, where did that come from?
I know I had to keep you in the room.
I know.
To keep you in the room. You were ready to check out.
No, I wasn't at all. No, I loved the energy in that room, Griselda. I mean, a bunch of really committed, hardworking, really positive women. I just said I had a train to catch back to Manchester the next day. And of course, I thought, oh, this is fantastic. I'm loving it. And you said, you can't go yet. And that caught me by surprise as well. You did it very well, by the way. It's like maybe the next train.
Yes. I'm so glad you stayed, Elizabeth. You're such an inspiration, and I'm so glad our paths have crossed. This is what I love about what I do. On days when it's a tough day and I look at the women I get to meet, the inspiration I get from you, the lessons I've learned just today listening to you and how you do life, how you do business, and just your whole approach to it. I think we need to be amplifying more authentic, purposeful leaders like yourself because they really are few and far between. And I don't think you realize how special you are. And I'm not saying that because I'm on the call with you. I'm genuinely saying that because I've been telling everybody in my life about Elizabeth and your humility,
Gosh.
your approach. And, it's just how you do business, how you do life. I find it really inspiring. And I hope I can have as much of an impact as you're having with your own work and the contribution you're making, not just to your own business, but the wider community as well. And it's been such an absolute pleasure to sit with you. I know you're busy. You probably have another train or plane to catch to go somewhere else. But before we end, I know you have a passion for art, and behind you, we have some of your collections, and there's a whole story around your mission to support women as well. If you don't mind just quickly telling the people listening to us why you keep investing in women's art.
Well, yes, it's Aboriginal art, actually, and they're female artists. I love the work that they do, obviously. I think if you can see that they're genuinely beautiful paintings. There's a lot of spiritualism behind First Nation. There's a lot of spiritualism behind Australian First Nation artists. It's their folklore, it's their connection to country, which is the environment, the connection to each other, and also how they're having to adapt to Western values and Western ways of living. And so I have huge respect for it. These paintings were actually purchased when I went to one of the artists' cooperatives. And so I got to meet the artists. And some of the larger ones are actually some of the leading female artists, and some of the smaller ones are female artists that actually work under the tutelage of some of the elders, the women elders. And so it's a lovely community as well, where the older, more experienced artists teach the younger women. So yeah, that's the story behind my paintings.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you again for having us, Elizabeth. And if you'd like to keep in touch with Elizabeth, she's on LinkedIn. You can go to Inform Solutions and find her there as well. This interview will be uploaded to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, as well as on the Novi website. And you can come and see Elizabeth in person at the Novi Awards on the 21st of November. She'll be giving a keynote, and she's also kindly agreed to sponsor a category and to support another woman as well. And she's clearly lifting as she climbs. Elizabeth, thank you so much. You make my work worth it, and I'm delighted that there are women and leaders like you in existence. Thank you.
Thank you, Griselda. I'm honored and I'm touched by the faith that you have in me, and I'm delighted to be able to give back in any way that I can. Just reach out to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.